Tyler, I don't think you and I have ever talked about any uranium companies on Investing Unscripted. We've talked about mining businesses and how tough it is.
Mining wasn't weird enough for our audience, so we decided to get even weirder and go with uranium mining because, hey, why make things easy?
Yeah, I will tell you that this one, we're going to talk about Uranium Energy Corporation, and it is a really interesting story so far. And there is something, a kernel of some potential there that could be pretty great. They've done one thing really well, but they haven't done the thing that's their actual business pretty well. But we're going to talk about that right here. I'm Jason Hall. This is Investing Unscripted. This video is sponsored by The Motley Fool. If you're looking for some really great stock ideas, go to our special link. Motley Fool is going to give you its 10 best stocks to buy right now, absolutely free. That link is fool.com/unscripted. You see it right there on the screen. Check out that link. Tyler, let's start with some of the background with uranium broadly. What's compelling about uranium, and why would investors want to even be considering a company that is in the uranium business?
There was a pretty large scare after the Fukushima nuclear disaster, and I think we all heard about that. Germany shut down all its reactors, Japan shut down a lot of reactors, and there was this general thought that we were going to move away from nuclear. But the tide has turned a little bit when it comes to thoughts on nuclear energy. There's a lot of momentum in the United States to build out nuclear capacity a little bit more. Japan is restarting a lot of its facilities. Construction in China of nuclear facilities is growing substantially, and there's a lot of other currently non-nuclear countries that are looking to do so.
For good reason, right? We've seen wind and solar have continued to become a bigger part of the mix. We still need baseload, that regular, steady supply that's not intermittent. And with everything that's happened with Russia's invasion of Ukraine affecting so much of the natural gas supply that comes from Russia into Europe, being now the geopolitical risk, right? That's a big thing. And then there's the data, the underlying data. Probably going to get some people yelling at me on Twitter and in the comments on YouTube. But the underlying data is that nuclear is overwhelmingly safe, right? There are the anecdotes and there are a couple of terrible disasters that have affected people, but broadly, it's one of the safest sources of energy and cleanest sources of energy. So that brings us to this moment.
Yeah, and it specifically talking about that kind of title change is important to understanding Uranium Energy Corporation because this is what we would call a speculative miner. I know that you and I have talked about these ad nauseum over the years of a lot of junior speculative mining companies that are like, we have these massive inferred resources available in these far off places. And if only we can get shovels in the ground and get it done. And they sell the promise of the idea of getting these facilities up and running. And then bang, we're going to be one of the most profitable sort of companies in the world. The marketing that they put into those investor presentations is spectacular. Uranium Energy Corporation feels like that. If you go up and down their investor presentations, they talk about a new extraction method called in situ, which is basically it's a drilling method where you drill down and inject chemicals, water, things like that, and try to move uranium from like the injection points to collection points without actually mining it like an open pit mine. It's for those of you who are familiar with tar sands or oil sands up in Canada, this is a similar method to how that is extracted as well. It's done in other extractive industries, but this would be this is a very much an unconventional way to extract uranium. It's a more speculative and unproven way to do it. Now, if we were to stop there, I think it would be a little bit of an eye roll and say, oh, this is just another junior miner who's promising the moon and probably can't deliver. But Uranium Energy did this really weird thing because when at the absolute nadir of nuclear energy's kind of attitude in the world, the price for uranium, it's called yellow cake, the price of it was so spectacularly low that there was nobody in the world that could produce it for the prices that it was selling for.
This was the period where it was at the bottom of when Japan had committed to take its reactors offline. In California, there were two of the same model of reactor as the Fukushima reactor. California regulators said would be taken offline. Germany was taking its nuclear offline. So all of that demand was just evaporating, right? And it crushed prices. Like you said, here, you see it right here. This slide from UEC's presentation in November 2016 hit 1775. They started buying uranium, Tyler.
Yeah, and that's where it gets really interesting is basically they said, look, this is silly. Nobody can produce at this levels. We'll buy all the uranium we can get our hands on at these prices, and we'll write a bunch of futures contracts if we can to try to get our hands on as much uranium as we can at these prices because we don't think there's any way in the world that it can keep going worse. Even like I was saying, even Kazatomprom, it's the world's largest uranium miner. They own more than 60% of the market in Kazakhstan. They can't produce at that price. And so as a result, it became this very opportune moment where we had this junior miner just load up on inventory of uranium and say, we'll take it. And then when American nuclear companies need it, we'll have it and we can sell it for way more than what we bought it for.
I'm using a little bit of hyperbole here, but essentially they use the greatest uranium trade of all time to fund their business, and they're still sitting on the results of that. So you see right here, this is through the end of January, almost 1.2 billion pounds of uranium on hand, and then through futures contracts that go through the end of next year, they've got another 1,000,000 pounds to be purchased at an average cost of $39 a pound. Tyler, here's uranium's most recent. And again, a spot price is fictional for uranium because there's not really a spot market. It's a very specialized thing, and you're usually selling directly to buyers, right? The bottom line is that what they're sitting on, that inventory and the inventory that they're going to be able to collect, is really valuable right now. So let's take that. We're bolting that value on top of this speculative, novel, unproven mining technique. What do you think? You put it all together. What do you think?
Here's the thing that makes this much more compelling than so many of these other speculative junior miners is they actually now have some sort of funding source, right? Like they've got a large inventory of uranium that they can sell at currently profitable prices, very profitable prices, to actually invest in the business. This is atypical for a lot of junior miners who have to sell a bunch of stock or take debt or try to find big, big partners like the big Freeport McMorans of the world or Rio Tinto or BHP Billiton, the really big miners that have all the money in the world, and say, hey, we've got this cool mine. Do you want to come fund it because you've got all the money? But this is with an actual internal funding mechanism. It's something that we've never really seen before. I am not smart enough to know if in situ extraction of uranium is a low cost, viable option for future uranium production.
They obviously understand the dynamics of the uranium market, and they were able to leverage the opportunity. If you look at their balance sheet, again, the yellow line is debt, the purple line, cash and short-term investments. They were able to leverage that opportunity to pay off their debt. They've been able to be debt-free for 2.5 years now, while they're steadily generating cash from trading uranium and then using that to fund the potential growth of their business. So put it all together, Tyler, and I think there's something compelling. We know there have been really good uranium traders. In your speculative corner of your portfolio, is this anything you're remotely interested in?
I need to spend more time understanding this new novel technology that, like I said, I wholly admit I'm not fully versed in. If I were to get a better handle of it and feel comfortable with it, and considering the geopolitical aspects of uranium kind of playing a little bit more role here. Like I said, 60% of the market is owned by
Yeah.
Kazakhstan. It's compelling enough to look harder and certainly spend a lot more time figuring out how well this works.
I think it is definitely compelling to take a look at. The tailwinds, I think, are really favorable for nuclear, which is a nice change. I think it's better for the world and creates some opportunity for investors. But I will leave you with these words before anybody rushes into this stock. One of the best ways to make a small fortune is to start out with a large fortune in a novel mining operation.